How's it going, everyone? This is Paul Garcia of Project Spurs. This is a quick reaction to the San Antonio Spurs' season opener loss to the Charlotte Hornets on Wednesday. The Spurs were in San Antonio at home, opening up the season. They ended up losing by 27 points to the Charlotte Hornets. So let's go into a quick recap, an instant analysis of this game. So here we have the NBA's raw box score here. We're going to basically go by quarters. We knew this was a tough night defensively for the Spurs. They allowed Charlotte to score 129 points in regulation. Charlotte scores 30 or more in every quarter of this game. So it was definitely defense was definitely one of the issues that the Spurs were definitely going to work on after this performance tonight. So let's go through a quick recap how the game went. In the first quarter, I noted that turnovers were a big issue for the team. They really struggled. Charlotte was very, very aggressive at having the Spurs turn over the ball. The threes also weren't falling. That doesn't help out when you're turning the ball over, is that your shots aren't going in either. So the Spurs had trouble shooting the ball. As far as the rotation, Pop went with that same starting five that ended the preseason with Trey Jones, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, and Jakob Poeltl. And then off the bench, the five players that played off the bench were Josh Primo, Doug McDermott, Josh Richardson, Keita Bates-Diop, and Zach Collins. So Pop went with basically like a 10-man rotation for 3 quarters of the game before, it really got out of hand in the second quarter. So then the second quarter comes and it continued. I noted here more turnovers for the Spurs, continued bad shooting. They're struggling to make their shots. And then the Hornets kind of take the game. They basically blow up the game there. They go up by 20 points. They go into halftime with a very large lead. The third quarter comes and the Spurs actually get very close. They get within 10 points of the Hornets, and this is a lot. Main reason is because of Keldon Johnson's play. He ends up getting really hot from three. He makes 3 3-pointers there in that third quarter. And so the Spurs get within 10, but then the Hornets the quarter, like on a 19-1 run, they really just run away with it. And then in the fourth quarter, it was pretty much over. The Hornets ended up going up by as many as 35 points. Pop pulled up most of the starters with 9 minutes left in the quarter, and we saw the end of the bench rotation. The end of the bench players like Gorgie Jang, Isaiah Roby, and Romeo Langford go into the game, but it was pretty much over at that point. So yes, the Spurs ended up losing their season opener there. Let's go ahead and look at how some of the individual players played. And let's first, before we do that, actually, let's tell the story of the game of what happened here in terms of using some of the data. All right, so I'm using the Spurs shot location box score that I created here. All right, so let's go through it. Yes, okay. All right, so let's continue to focus on defense first. One of the main things was that Charlotte really had a great night from the 3-point line. They made 45% of their threes. Even on their jumpers, they made 62% of their mid-range jumpers. That's a very hard thing to do in the NBA, and they did that on this night. One of the players who didn't finish as one of the leading scorers for Charlotte, but I really want to note him, was Kelly Oubre Jr. And the reason why I want to mention him is because he was one of the first players on Charlotte that I saw in that first quarter where he kind of figured out, oh wow, I can get into the teeth of the Spurs' defense in the paint, really attack them. We see here early on he had 8 points in the paint, and when other players see that, they're able to get into the paint as well, and then that's what allows them to kick out to the open 3-point shooters. And so I really feel like Oubre set the tone for Charlotte, noticing that Spurs paint was kind of open there, that the Hornets players could get in there, and I feel like his teammates followed suit. And so the Hornets had a great night on offense. 7 players scored in double figures there for them. Again, they also had a good jump shooting night, like I mentioned, 45% from 3, 62% from mid-range. But again, the Spurs had a tough night defensively, and that's going to be something they're going to have to work on. On offense, the Spurs had the opposite. They really struggled from the 3-point line. We saw that early on. This reminded me of that early preseason game against Houston where the Spurs struggled from 3 as well, and then things just fell apart. And so the Spurs ended up shooting 21% as a team from the 3-point line, not efficient. Same thing for mid-range. They weren't efficient there either. They were able to get into the paint. 55% of their shots came from there, and they made 54% of them. Some of their paint attackers were Jakob Poeltl had 14 points there. Keldon Johnson had 8 of his 20 there in the paint. And also Trey Jones got in there with 8 points. One of the areas on offense that the Spurs need to make as a strength, and they've mentioned this before, is the fast break. In the preseason, they did pretty good here. They had about 16 to 20 points in the fast break, getting out and running with this young quick group out on the floor, but they weren't able to do that tonight. They only ended up with 10 fast break points. The Hornets outscored them. And then one of the areas that Charlotte also took advantage of was the Spurs' turnovers. The Spurs had 15 turnovers. The Hornets turned points. Turnovers are going to be an issue for this team because we know that some of these young players like Keldon, Vassell, even veteran players with more responsibility like Jakob Poeltl, they're going to have a little bit more trouble now because there's more responsibility on their end to create on offense and without a player like DeJounte Murray there anymore. So that's kind of expected. The turnovers are going to be an issue for this team, and they're going to have to continue to work those out as the season goes along. Keldon was definitely one of the players that really stood out tonight. Again, he was one of the players that there wasn't a lot of bright spots for this team, but Keldon was one of those players who played well overall in the game. And again, he kind of got them there with that little run of threes to make it more competitive. So one of the models that I created just kind of takes all your raw box score stats and kind of creates like an algorithm. And so Keldon in this algorithm ended up topping out as the top player here, by far surpassing his teammates, because he did a lot of different things. He not only was he scoring the points, leading scorer 20 points, he was also hustling and getting the boards. He had 11 rebounds, 9 on the defensive end, 4 assists, 2 steals, and just 2 turnovers, considering that he's gonna have more responsibility. Jakob Poeltl also goes with 14 points. He has 9 rebounds, 2 assists, and then the 3 turnovers, something to watch. Trey Jones, 14 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. Again, kind of filling out the box score there. Trey had 2 blocks. That was very interesting. And then Devin was a player who you expected to have a good night for the Spurs, because he was doing that in the preseason, but he really struggled tonight shooting the ball. He went 3 of 15 from the floor for 11 points, and then from 3 he continued to struggle there, where he went 0 of 8 from the 3-point line. One of the things you want to note though are the 4 assists, because again, he's having to create more now for his teammates, and he did have those 4 assists, but he did have the 2 turnovers. So again, those are just some players that stuck out looking at the raw box score numbers. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to read a quote from Tom Osborne of the San Antonio Express News. He had a quote on from Coach Pop right after the game. So let's go through that quote real quick. Okay, so here was Pop, according to Tom Osborne of the San Antonio Express News via Twitter. Pop on his reaction, he says, "You start with the fact that we got thumped and you don't avoid it. You don't hide from it. We got our butts kicked, and from there, you can look to improve. You can't act like it didn't happen. That's the most important, Pop." So this is basically Pop saying, the Spurs, the first thing they do is just accept it. Yes, they got they got blown out here in this game. Here's more Pop on what the Spurs can take away. He says, "Second most important is that you have to stick together and understand that it's going to be a long process, and there are lots of things we have to learn." So again, there's Pop knowing, preaching patience, that this is going to be a long season. It's going to be, with this young team that's not expected to win a lot of games, it's going to be more development and growing season for them. And then just some final takeaways. This is a tough one, because the Charlotte's one of those teams where this is one of those games the Spurs might have a chance of winning. The Hornets were only favored by 1 point, and the fact that they really struggled is probably a cause for concern. But it is only one game. If you're in the crowd who wants the Spurs to tank, so they can have their best chance of landing Victor Wembanyama in the 2023 draft. This is not you don't want to see them getting blown up by 27, but you want to, they got to lose the games. As long as they're losing the games, that's going to help their lottery chances, as long as they finish with one of the top 3 worst records. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.